Our relationships with ourselves is all about judgment, which then starts to reflect what? Our relationship with God, our relationship with others. Like there's these reflective qualities, right, that I find in all of our relationships, right? How I show up with me is often how I show up with God. How I show up with God is often how I'll show up with other people, right? So there can be beauty in that and gratitude in that, but there can also be like major like judgment around it, right? One of my teachers always used to say, God's not trying to catch us on a technicality. It's just like, oh, no, right there, you messed up, you missed the spot. Get rid of him, right? He's like a bad Muslim or whatever, right? So we can just easily go into this narrative. How do we know that a relationship is a healthy one? Might be another way to like look at this. Let's get some words in. Doesn't have to be a lot. You can take your mic off, you can throw it in the chat. Just like what comes up when you think of a healthy relationship in your life? Like what are some elements in there? Mutual benefit. Mutual benefit. I like that, right? So there's a recognition that we're both like in support of each other, right? It's not one-sided in that regard, right? I think that's essential, because I've certainly been in relationships with people who I liked, who I resonated with, but it felt like I was the one who was giving a lot, right? I was always giving, and not that I need to get, right? But there does need to be this kind of a two-way street. It can't be a one-way street. Well, we got a lot going here. All right, let me back up. Balanced, right? So that's another thing, balanced and symmetrical. I like that, right? So there's a sense that like there's a give and a get, right? There's an ability to it's not unbalanced, right? We've all probably experienced relationships with that, like that were off balance. And I think the ones in my experience that last the longest are the ones where I'm committed to balance in the relationship. Honesty, right? In that is so much. We have authenticity in that. How do we show up as our true selves? The good, the bad, the ugly, right? Or are the people that we hang out with, are they only receiving the polished version of ourselves, right? It's like, I got to make myself look all good, and I got to make sure I got my game tight so that this person's going to like me, or this person's going to accept me, right? So I have to like lead with the best version of myself. And I'll be honest, the people in my inner circle, they don't always see the best version of myself. And I let them see into me, right? And it doesn't mean I show up as a jerk or like I'm abusive, or that's not where I'm going, right? But it's like, if I'm in a wounded place, right? If I'm exhausted, right? If I'm not feeling well, like, can I name that? Can I show up in a way that's authentic, and vulnerability is connected to authenticity, because we can't be authentic unless we lean into vulnerability. And a lot of us have a complex relationship with vulnerability, right? I think that's one of the reasons, even Aisha, I heard you just naming like, you know, how like this feeling of joy that being able to like show up someplace, and we've already seen vulnerability here this morning. There's already been authenticity. There's already been vulnerability. There's already been honesty, right? Being there for each other, Hadil, I like that, right? So again, like this idea of like, we're seeing this patterns, right? Mutual support of each other, right? I'm glad, Rashida, you mentioned emotional intelligence in this, because sometimes in our relationships, we can get caught in the web of like emotions, right? Or emotional flooding, right? And remember, even in the beginning of the sit, are we able to like parse apart different emotional states, even at the same time, right? So a lot of this, what we're talking about is like the ability to be more nuanced in our approach to things like emotions, in our approach to things like boundaries, even opinions, right? Because like when I hold my opinion too strongly, what happens to respect? It's harder to hold on to sometimes, right? Because then I go in my corner, you go in yours, and then next thing I know, the defenses are up, right? So I think this ability to like be more nuanced, to navigate the gray area, which to me is a big part of emotional intelligence, right? Just being aware of emotions and then knowing how to navigate them, right, in a proper way. Because I'm sure, I'll speak for myself. I've certainly seen relationships damaged because of my inability to navigate emotions properly, right? Or in a way that has more adab, in a way that has more, what would be the word? Like not manners, but like almost like an understanding, right? There's like a deeper understanding of like what emotions and how I'm engaging them, how I'm letting them come out of me, right? Because we can harm people with our emotions often, right? If we're not careful. Oh, I love, Malika, I love what you wrote about values. So like having an alignment with values, right? Because like we know, or we should know, and this is where the mindfulness or self-awareness starts to come in, right? Is a person misaligned with my deepest values, right? I may like them a whole lot. I may think they're cool and they got all these great things, but it's like, is there a deeper alignment? And what I've found as I age is that the ones that the values aren't aligned, they usually naturally kind of fall away. They dissipate, right? Because it's like, I don't want to work at that because I don't have the energy to work at that. And maybe the other person doesn't want to work at it either, right? So the place where it gets complex, and we're not going to have a ton of time to get into today, sometimes we're in relationship with people that we don't have any choice that we're in relationship with them. And this is where it gets complex. And usually those people are in the inner circle because they're family members, or they're people that we're bound to, right? And how we navigate that is very complicated, right? There may even, Aisha, maybe a note to us, like that might be a good topic at some point to look at, is like navigating familial relationships. Really, I mean, if we're really honest about it, because it's like we usually don't have the option to cut family. It's like sometimes we can, right? But there's a lot of times we can't, right? Whereas with friends, it can be easier, right? Or acquaintances, depending on that inner ring, like how close they are, right? When someone's an acquaintance, it's easier to just kind of trim it and cut them out, right? So that's a very, very deep one there, but thank you for that. Open and safe communication, right? So there's a trust, there's an openness and the ability to communicate, and safety is really a key piece in this, right? It's like, and that's something we can all start to, again, going back to mindfulness, is like, how do I know I feel safe? Well, I know that my nervous system can feel it. I can feel it in my body when I'm not safe, right? I feel like maybe tense or tight. There's tension, right? So when we start, we can even just start with the body, paying more attention to the body. What are the signals that the body's sending us, right? About safety or not being safe. But again, we've got to pay attention. We've got to learn how to be aware of those clues that the body's sending us. Mutual respect of boundaries. Again, another tough one, especially with family or with those people that we're bound to, right? Because we may want to set boundaries up, but we can't, right? Sometimes family members won't agree to our boundaries, right? They won't want to accept our boundaries. So that's a very difficult, and I think next month, Aisha, we are doing boundaries, aren't we? In the coming months. I thought we
wrapped up boundaries, I think, in July.
I kind of feel like it's incomplete, man. It's like, we could spend the whole year talking about boundaries. Anyways, that might be something to revisit in the future, because, and something again connected to family, I think would be really ideal for this. Anyways, feeling seen, feeling heard, right? And again, like having this ability, like communication feels like it's flows, right? There's an openness to communication. Susan named maybe the biggest one, love, right? One of my favorite quotes, I think it's a Parker Palmer quote. He said, the first labor of love is to listen. The first labor of love is to listen, right? So that again connects with like listening, hearing, right? Pausing for people and making sure that we're in relationships with people who can do that with us. And if, again, we're sometimes, and there's been some people in my life, like I said before, who like, I really treasured and valued, but like some of these things were off, right? It was just like one or two things. It was just like, oh, this feels unbalanced, or it doesn't feel like I'm being heard, right? Or I'm being seen. And ultimately, they didn't last. They didn't last the marathon. Right? They were only relationships that were there for a sprint, not a marathon. Opening and allowing space for one another. Compassion is another big one, right? The difference between empathy and compassion, we've talked about that a little bit before, but just as a reminder, right? Empathy, this idea that we can, and it's another key for relationships, being able to put ourselves in someone's situation. Like, what would it be like if I were there, if I were them, right? And although I may never completely know that, I think it is a very, very good thing for us to build. Compassion comes from that, right? So compassion is like, empathy is like the earth that we till to grow compassion. Because once we can put ourselves in someone else's shoes, compassion has like an active quality to it. We want to actually help. Like we want to, there's an effective, like it affects us. And then we want to be like, okay, what can I do to help? Right? Or what is this person needing? Sometimes is even a better question. Sometimes people don't want help, right? Or sometimes people don't need the problem to be fixed, right? I know as a therapist, I struggle with that a lot. Go into fix-it mode. One thing I like to say to people who especially are in the inner circle, and this might be an invitation for y'all to maybe try this, is either if I have something I need to share with someone, or a topic or something that I need to get out, or they want to talk to me about something that they're going through, I'll either ask them or I'll say like, I don't need feedback right now. I just need to be heard. Right? Or I don't need help fixing this problem, right? Or I'll ask someone, it's like, do you want help fixing this, or do you just need an ear? Because I know there's been lots of times where I've like tried to share something with someone, and I just needed to process. I didn't need them to be like, oh, well, did you try this? And oh, you should have done that. And maybe if you did this, then you wouldn't be in that. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I need to just get some stuff out. I don't need to get everything fixed right now. So it's a nice way to frame things. We can either say it or we can ask, right? Transparency. So we're starting to see some patterns now, right? Safety, like being able to be who I am, the real me. Again, it's vulnerability, authenticity, transparency. Omar, I love it. Radical acceptance of the other, right? Now, that has its limits sometimes, right? And it should. But sometimes it does need to be radical, right? Because there's many times where, and I think especially with the inner circle, that's where things get the stickiest, right? It's with family members, with kids. You're supposed to be like this, not that. right? And while as a father, I do have the job of trying to guide my children and raise them in a way, there's also does need to be some radical acceptance. It's just like, my son's not going to like all the stuff that I like. He's not going to want to watch the same movies I watch sometimes. And it's a little thing, but it's a good place to start, right? Because it's just like, can we agree to disagree? And then seeing, is that a threat to me? Right? Is it a threat when someone doesn't look at things the same way I do? And why would that be a threat? It's almost a trauma exposure response, right? There's a threat here. Like there's something, and we see this more and more in politics, right? Just all the stuff around masks mandates and the, even religion, people going into their corners, right? Again, that inability to navigate the nuance. Empathy, mercy, and I love the mercy piece. Yeah, that's right. It's the same with being a nurse, right? If I don't do it, who will? Right? If I don't do it, who will? And that can be that can be a real dangerous, because I've followed that down before and really hit burnout. I hit compassion fatigue. I hit burnout. I had vicarious trauma. Why? In the name of service for the community. I've got to help. I've got to fix everybody. Right? And it's like never being able to say no. And it's like, and I've said this before in this group, but it was always a powerful thing for me. When I went through that, like not being able to say no to people, I realized I was saying no to lots of people who were in that inner circle because I was too busy taking care of everybody on the outer circle. And it's like, why am I spending so much time on the peripheral? When was the last time I had quality time with my best friend? Right? When was the last time I had quality time with my wife or my kids or my father? Right? Never mind like all the people on the outside who I have to fix. Yeah, leaving the ego at the door. How can I see someone in wholeness, even if they're going through a struggle or a challenge? Right? And I think like we can lead with that good opinion. Like this person is whole. They haven't found the wholeness, right? I've certainly been there, right? It's like, that's what Iman is, isn't it? Right? Belief in something that we can't see, right? So it's like, I believe I'm whole. I just need to find the wholeness. And for me, that was like it was like this big shift in perspective where it's like, I don't need to correct people or fix people, right? Or even change people. And being a parent was a deep, deep, deep lesson in that, right? Whatever I thought I had going on and how great I had it going on, as soon as I had kids, it's all blown out of the water, right? They become the teachers because they're the mirrors. They're mirroring me. You want to see you? Look at your kids. It's like, ooh, again, the good, bad, the ugly, right?